Welcome back to Unplug with Mel. I'm your host, Mel Mosier. If you missed the incredible Mallory Herons episode, catch the recap and get ready for our next journey with Justin Dorsey, our delightful Lincoln connection. Mallory shared powerful insights at the intersection of personal and professional life. Now let's welcome Justin as he shares his recent what-if journey in the job market and promising valuable insights for your next career move. Don't miss this inspiration. Stay tuned. You can hear us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and iHeartRadio. Thank you for joining me on Unplug with Mel. So I think that you have time to come in and unplug. And this is going to be a little new for me because I usually kind of know my guest lately. And I really don't know you all that well. We've connected on LinkedIn, and I've seen things mutually shared. I just don't know your background, except for that you are in HR. So I know there's a story to tell in there, and we're going to get right into it, where you get to talk about your bio and your journey, and I'll let you take it away.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mel, for having me. Really appreciate it. I've enjoyed kind of getting to follow you from a distance. This conversation about kind of our story, what will help about humans is that we've all got a story to tell, and we may not think our story is especially interesting, but I believe that it has a purpose and a meaning, and there's something as we look back on it that can ultimately be a guiding light for somebody else. Maybe they can avoid a mistake or learn from a mistake you've made, or maybe they can just kind of attach to something and realize something that might help them on their journey as well. And so
that's the
thanks
goal
for having
here.
me. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you just never know what the audience is going through, right? And that's what's so fun about this type of medium, is that we can connect with people all over the world, and you just never know when something you share or something you've been through will help somebody else. So
I love it.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was saying with our journeys and stuff, the whole theme and platform with Unplug with Mel is to tell your story to inspire infinite growth. And the reason why I plugged in infinite is because we think that when we tell it one-on-one in person, that's as far as it goes, but that's not true. Because the next person that they meet, they'll be like, you need to talk to Justin. And so with the podcast, whether it's an audio only or in video, or even networking like an HR community event, you're going to hear a story. And then the next time they're connected with someone else, and they'll be talking about a struggle or a confrontation or something that they're going through career-wise, and like, I got the perfect person that you need to connect with. And I love how that happens organically in our community. And I think you'll probably brush up on it here, that we didn't wake up one morning and going, I'm going to put on my best suit and become HR. To take us through your journey and share some key moments or experiences that shaped who Justin is today.
Happy to share. So I was raised in West Texas. I was born in Lubbock, lived there for 8 years, moved to Abilene, and moved to San Antonio. So moved around a bit as a kid. And I think that in a way shaped my experience, because I had to learn how to adapt to a new situation, new setting, new school, leaving the old friends, connecting with new ones, and just kind of being uncomfortable in a way. I like to say I'm a recovering middle child. And so there's like equal parts of rebellious and also like people pleaser. It's the weirdest dynamic, but middle children get that, So we're not always sure where we're going with things, but it's good in a way, because without being uncomfortable or in your physical fitness or whatever it may be, you've got to be out of your comfort zone a bit and battle against some resistance, because resistance will ultimately help you get stronger. So moved around a few times, and I took like an aptitude test about like, what are you going to be when you grow up? And it came back with some results that at the time I was confused by, because it told me probably a future in like agriculture or, some sort of growing crops or, farming or ranching basically was going to be my
Farmer
future.
Justin. Okay. Okay.
Yes. And I didn't think much about it at the time. I just was kind of like, well, that's weird. Because I was on a path to go into a medical profession. And I started out at Texas Tech studying their pre-physical therapy program and realized that that level of commitment to sciences was not for me. And so I kind of went through a moment of like, okay, well, now what do I do? This is where I thought things were going after I realized that my dreams of playing professional sports sort of, hit a wall at about 14 years old. So I was like, now what am I going to do? And so I transitioned into sociology, which I find to be fascinating. But unless you're going to do research or be a professor, maybe there's not as many career options with that degree background.
Yeah.
And so I ultimately ended up feeling a calling on my life to go to Southwestern Seminary and study marriage and family counseling. And that was quite an experience of, switching from sociology to psychology and starting to kind of understand how, what a profession in counseling could potentially look like, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, while I was attending graduate school, I got a job where I was working part-time at a place that allowed flexibility for students like me. I could come and go, start, if I go to class, come back, get some work done, just didn't really matter what it looked like. And I was working in the accounting department, like doing reconciliations and bank statement. It was just not super fun for me. So a position opened up in HR, and I said, I don't really know what HR is other than it's not accounting. And so I asked if I could switch in. I was like, as much as I'm enjoying this, not so much. But the first lesson there I took away was just that you got to bloom where you're planted. So if you're working in accounting, or if you're digging ditches, or if you're pulling weeds, or whatever you're at that moment in time, you must do it with excellence. And if you don't, when other doors get opened, you may not get to walk through them because you haven't necessarily proven yourself to be reliable, trustworthy. And so even though I didn't love accounting, I was doing well enough that when I raised my hand to try something else, they said yes. And so I moved into the world of HR, and I got, yes. And 20 years later, almost, it's still, it's still paying the bills, which is a good thing, I guess. And so I started off like a lot of people, just doing the basics, hiring people, paying them, entering new hires, terminating people from the system, really just the transactional, tactical HR. But the kind of lesson number 2 for HR people may watch this. You're not going to get to do the fun stuff in HR if you're not executing in the basics.
Yep. Very true.
Because you won't be trusted.
It's like, what did they call it? Doing the
to do bigger things if you're not.
Yeah, it's doing the mundane part of the HR, the transactional, the day-to-day that earns your stripes. And there's no way of bypassing it. You don't get into HR by never understanding a benefits package or a payroll system or an onboarding recruiting strategy. There's just no way. You can't fake it until you make it in HR in that regards. Now, can you learn as you go on a payroll system? Yes. Can you learn on asking the right questions in an interview? Yes. But you can't say you've done it and then get into the leadership part of HR without having actually done it. You'll definitely out yourself very quickly that you don't have that prior experience.
I was just going to say, over time, to your point, once you've done the basics, you start to develop your HR brand, I guess, for lack of a better word, and knowing who you are and knowing which parts you gravitate towards, which ones spark joy more so than others. And a lot of people will start to specialize after they've been in HR for a while
So what
because,
do you specialize in?
you know, it really goes back to the counseling aspect. I enjoy employee relations, performance management, uh, corrective action, helping people get back on track, because I firmly believe most people are not trying to get fired or lose their job. And so you just have to figure out, okay, what's a symptom and what's a cause? And if we can get to the cause, maybe we can fix it, right?
Yeah,
And so
correct.
I just
I want to
gravitate
I
towards.
want to come on to the upside of things too. There are not many men in HR. So has that thrown people for a loop? So when they're coming to meet a male HR manager versus female, and how has that been a challenge, or maybe it's been easy? Who know? I don't know. But I've worked in HR for a while, and most of the HR people that I've ever met are female.
Yes, it is a bit of a female dominated profession. Funny enough, I actually got that as an interview question one time. It's like, what's it
Really?
like being a male in HR? And I'm like, I don't know if you're supposed to ask that question, but I'll humor you. You know, I don't mind answering that question.
Yeah.
You know, I grew up, got an older sister and a younger sister. You know, certainly um, was around females quite a bit. I've got a sensitive side to me, or as my wife likes to tell me, I'm the girl in the relationship. And so, you know,
Was
maybe
there
just.
any setbacks in your 20 years of HR or challenges that you faced along that way? And how did you overcome them?
Wow. So there were a lot of learning moments, teachable moments, I guess you could say. I think
Mhm.
back to my early career, you know, and I think we can probably all relate to having things going on in our personal lives that carry over into the workplace,
Mhm.
whether that be through raising children or through a relationship, a marriage. You know, you're not designed to just compartmentalize those things and not have them impact you in some way
Mhm.
in the workplace. And I was really struggling with some stuff happening outside of work. And it was to the point that I just was kind of I wasn't the best version of myself at work, I guess you could say.
Mhm.
My patience was thin, and my ability to show up and speak up, like Tony Bridwell talks about a lot, I just wasn't able to do that all that well. And my boss cared enough about me at that time to call me out on it in a way that was constructive and loving. And I trusted him enough to accept that advice and to start to make some changes, because he knew what I was going through and acknowledged that it was hard, but was also like, but you can't stay there. You know, you can't just set up
Mhm.
camp and live there. You do have to start to make some moves towards being what we need you to be as an employee, and what your coworkers need from you as HR. And so
Mhm.
it got my attention that he didn't, because it could have been a lot more punitive, because I really
Yeah.
wasn't doing my job well. But the fact that he was constructive about it made such a huge impact on me, and now still to this day influences how I counsel and work with other people around me.
Right, because while we noticed that in our staff or our colleagues, that for the moment they were up on this great climb, they're doing great work, and then all of a sudden there's a shift and they're now down performing. That's not an immediate termable offense. It's a check-in. It's a check-in like, hey, I'm concerned. This is not the level of performance that we're used to from you. Is there anything you would like to share in a safe environment? And when they realize that they can come to HR in that capacity, that's that connection that we're here for. And we're like, okay, we can get this reworked. We can work out this problem. We do need you to come back refreshed, ready to go. And maybe it's a leave of absence. Maybe it's an accommodation on the schedule. Maybe it's, continued check-ins one-on-one with our staff to say, hey, I still see you. I still hear you. You're valuable. You can get through this season, because you're right. There is no way of holding anyone accountable in their professional life if we do not acknowledge that they have a personal life. There's just no way around it. There used to be a stereotypical design where you leave your stuff at the door at work. Well, there's sometimes you can't. It's eating you from the inside out, and it's going to be your patience. It's going to be your work ethic. It's going to be your projects. It's going to be your deadlines. And if someone like your boss doesn't check in and be like, okay, Justin, I know you could do better work than this. So what's up? And then they hear you out and they're like, okay, I get it, but you can't stay here forever. And that's almost like what I like to teach in coaching is the refiner's fire, that we're meant to go through those seasons so that we come out sharper than we were. And you look back on those setbacks or those challenges, and you wouldn't necessarily rewrite them from your story because they made you better. And I think that's a critical motivation in HR. We're not in that seat of HR because we haven't gone through something similar from our staff or our colleagues or even our leadership, or how to HR your boss. They go through it too. We're human. I think your quote that you sent me was, you cannot have human resources without the human. Is that what it was? Or without the human, you don't have the resource.
Right. Exactly.
Did I say that right? I probably butchered it.
Yeah. No, you got it. That's right. Without the human, you don't get the resource. And I see so many companies struggle now in a post-pandemic environment. They have somehow tried to revert back to old tactics, and it's like for a little while, for a few years, maybe they when a lot of us went remote, they started to think like, oh, we really got to value our people more. We got to treat them better. We've got to do all these things that seem so obvious to you and me. But as time has changed, we've started to forget some of those lessons. And so companies are reverting back to not treating candidates as well, not treating their employees as well. And then they're wondering why they have retention problems. Mm-hmm. They wonder why people are leaving, And so it's HR's job to be the advocate, to be the voice of the people, to also be the ears, to be able to pick up on, because when I'm in meetings, a lot of times with the leadership team, I'm keying in on how's this going to impact our people, Mm-hmm. And if there's a reason for me to wave my arms, I need to do it, but sometimes it's just good information to know. But when these decisions get made in an ivory tower or removed from the impact of how that's going to, influence an employee's job satisfaction or desire to stay with the organization, you've got to be there and will to stand the gap and be an employee advocate, because you lose the human element, so many things start to unravel from that point.
It's very true. I kind of do it as a visual learner for those that are listening and stuff like that. It's a balance beam where if you teeter too much to the employee, you're not necessarily with the mindset of the employer. You're missing something there. But if you're not listening to the employee and too much of the employer, you're going to have shown in turnover, retention, culture, that type of thing. So it really teeter-tots on that whole balance, almost right then, a little bit to the employer, a little bit to the employee. And it's a work of art. It's a work of what HR does, so that we're in the room with the leadership team and we're allying for our staff, going, okay, if you remove this from our benefit package, you're going to have at least 15% turnover. There's no way. Is there a compromise here? Or, okay, I get that you want to merge with this company. I'm all for it and stuff, but have we really looked into their mission, their values, their strategic planning to where it aligns with what we stand for before we solidify that deal? And it's so weird to say HR has a say in that. Yeah, we have a voice, whether they listen to it or not. That's up for leadership to decide. But if we did not speak up at that time and we left that meeting and the merger happened and it was a company that didn't align, you have massive turnover. And it happens every day. You hear it through the news, massive layoffs, massive this, because the companies that decided to merge together for a profit forgot the person.
Amen. That's well said. I've seen it myself where companies have done appropriate due diligence on an acquisition, and it's not didn't make it easy, but it does make it a lot smoother
Mhm.
long term. But then I've also been part of organizations that have acquired companies that are not a cultural fit, or the clients don't match in line. The technology is very different, and it just becomes a tremendous headache for HR and then for the other parts of the organization as well. But I can only speak for HR. And HR, we are, maybe this is an unpopular opinion, but I'll say it. HR doesn't create culture. Okay. That is not our job to create it. We can take care of it. We can cultivate it, because I think of it like soil. That's where my farming comes in. You're building healthy soil. You're adding some amendments. You're taking out some weeds. You're doing those things. But the leadership team, the ownership, whatever it is that you're a part of, they're going to set the tone. And if their culture is not, if their desires are not focused on the employee, but really just focus on the profit, you will be battling that in perpetuity. I promise you.
So very keen on that. I like that. I'm going to have to use that soil expression myself. We're just cultivating the soil of the company. I like that a lot. In this journey of your career and personal life, is there a particular inspiring moment or a memorable victory that you would like to acknowledge today?
Yeah, I have a few that came to mind with that question. But the one that really sticks out for me ultimately led to me leaving an organization, but I stood my ground for something I believed in, and because of that, I can feel good about how things went down. And
Yeah.
so,
Wow.
what I mean by that is that the question sometimes is, who does HR complain to, right? Like, who does HR go to with their concerns? And we're not built out of we're not like driving a tank where we're like completely bulletproof and immune from
Mm-hmm.
relation or going to face, right? And so I I
Mm-hmm.
I made clear I stood up for myself in a situation where there was some serious mistreatment going on with another employee, and I through an investigation that was handled by HR, which is really awkward for somebody in HR. It was pretty clear that there was not alignment with kind of the response to this particular situation, right? Like, we like to
Mm-hmm.
think that maybe bullying has gone away,
No.
but there's little bullies like at almost every workplace if you look close
Mm-hmm.
enough.
Yep.
And sometimes it's not necessarily called that, because it's like, oh, that's just how John is. Everybody knows John, he's a jerk, but it's like, imagine though, it's like having a rock in your shoe. Like, why do you just keep walking on it and you're uncomfortable? You're just like, this is just how walking is. It
Mm-hmm.
hurts. No, it doesn't have to hurt. You need to take the rock out.
Yep.
And when you get rid of a bully in the workplace, then ultimately everyone is able to collectively breathe a sigh of relief, because they were all thinking it,
But
but
nothing
just
was ever
nothing had
done with
ever been done about it. And
it.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
because culture is not what you advertise on a company website or on pamphlets or on funny swag. Culture is what you're allowing the bad people to do. I mean,
Which you,
that's where the
my quote.
line gets set, is in what
Mhm.
you're allowing.
My quote for life is, what you tolerate is what you allow. And so if you tolerate John,
Mhm.
because that's just John, that is your hidden culture. Another.
Yeah, I did end up finding a different role, which, it's a scary thing at times to walk away from something that's not necessarily broken, but maybe not heading in a good direction. And my dad retired after almost 40 years with the same company. And so
Yeah.
he looks at my employment record and calls me the job hopper, right? And I say, Dad, no, I'm not a job hopper. I'm a job selector, because I, you got to think about what's going to ultimately, yes, provide for your family, but also provide something you feel good about doing in an area you believe in. The sweet spot of job satisfaction is the alignment of the three circles of you're interested in it, you have the ability to do it, and the company needs it. If you can get those overlapping, you're going to find job satisfaction more than likely, and it can be challenging at times as you go throughout your career. One of those things gets out of alignment for a while. It can be tough to get it corrected, but I think a lot about now as a dad, with my kids, they do not care what I do for a living one bit, about meetings and emails and presentations and things of that nature. But then what they care about is me being their dad, and so I've gotten better over time about, shutting it off, work-life boundaries, not balance, but boundaries.
Yep.
And that at the risk of sounding cynical, I don't know if I believe you can love a job. I'm just going to be honest with you. I believe you can like a job a whole lot, and that's great. But love is for relationships. Love is for family and friends and certain animals in your life, maybe. But I don't know. People are like, hey, you started a new job. You love it. I'm like, it's still a job. I still have to work, so.
Still have to
Anyway.
work. Yeah, I get it. My kids don't even know what I do as an HR, but they did hear about my podcast and like, you're on video? How cool. So they'll take bits and pieces of what I do for a living and they'll pick the part where they think is cool, but they have no idea what I do in HR or whatnot. They do know that our product is public transportation where I currently work at. And so the buses in our city, they'll all drive by that's where my mom works. That's what she does. And I'm like, I don't drive the buses. I don't have nothing to do with the bus side of things, but that's the rationale with things on that part. And they take great pride in that, but they don't care. They care that you're home and that you're present and that they're taken care of in their hierarchy of needs. In that, I wanted to touch up on, I'm pretty sure you might be familiar with Bruce Waller, correct?
Yeah.
Now, he's
Good
one of
friend of mine.
my mentor things. And he says, having a career or whatever you do is a life of significance. You're living a life of significance. And that's whether your career is exactly in alignment where you need it to be or it's not. But it's in significance in every area of your life. So from your family to your friends to your payroll to your company that you work for. And so it kind of connects those dots with when you left that one company, it's because it was no longer going to live a life of significance and there was going to actually hinder that. And we should never settle for that. And so I like his words of wisdom in that part because that makes me be more intentional on anything I take on new or add to my plate, or whether or not I'm in a shift of a season. Is it adding significance into my life, who Mel Mosier is? And it's amazing what doors those open there. So thank you for sharing that. As we wrap up our time together, this is a part that I love the most. It's recognizing that we all need support and guidance in our journey. And can you share a few mentors and colleagues that have just played that significant role in who Justin is?
Well, I've thought a lot about, sort of the concept of HR for HR and how do we put our own oxygen mask on and what does self-care look like? I've done some presentations on that topic because it's super important for us to recharge our batteries, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, you've only got so much time to spend in the day. And are you putting it in the right areas? Are you putting it in things that are draining or things that are energizing, right? And so the great thing about the HR community is just that, and that there is a community. And I feel like it's really changed in the last decade to where when I first started in HR, I was like, why is everyone so mean and kind of bitter and like grumpy? I mean, I'm just being honest with you. That was
No,
maybe
no, I
15.
love it. I love it. And I think it stems from their leadership. They weren't allowed to do what they were called to do, and they were really handcuffed to the transactional side of HR and not the humanity side of HR. And in the last decade, there's a shift. COVID also really helped us there, where the employers are looking at HR a little bit differently, going, okay, are we in compliant? Are we doing the right things? Are we trying to keep people from not jumping ship during a remote season? And they started realizing that HR had a lot more in their tools for success than they ever gave us credit for. But I love how you said that HR has to recharge themselves. Do you have mentors that have helped you recharge?
Yeah, mentor, it can take on a lot of different ways, but I look at it more in terms of just connections that I know that I can reach out to and be real. And,
I love that.
I've got folks like Jimmy Taylor from Dallas HR, who's been a real positive influence in my life. Carla Cowan was the president of Fort Worth HR before she handed off the reins to me, which was just amazing to work with. You mentioned Bruce. I talked about Tony Bridwell. It sets a great example. There's somebody that just gets it, very sure of himself and how he wants to be as an HR person, because a lot of times HR was fighting to be heard and to be seen and all of these things, but we did ourselves a disservice when we got to the table, is because we didn't necessarily understand the other seats at the table as well. And so you can't just be good at HR. You have to be a business person with an HR background. And that's people like Tony that are sure of themselves in that way. They know that they can bring value to an organization, and they don't have to sit there, be the loudest voice or the most charismatic in the room. You just have to have that quiet confidence that when you speak up, you've earned their trust and respect enough that they'll listen. And sometimes that's all we're trying to get. Sometimes we don't make the final decision a lot. We'll advise and consult, but if they're listening, at least we can make our difference and make an impact on it. So
I love that. And I have just recently got to know Tony a little bit more from our connections through Dallas HR, Fort Worth HR, and HR Southwest. And I have literally loved every time he has spoken. But I also love him as our MCs because he's just that engaging. Like there's not a dull moment with Tony. And so what a great role model, and just having that HR to HR connection with him as another male in the industry, because I could not imagine. I have a wealth of women that I could go to, and it's just amazing to see that you are being fed the way you need to be in the HR through men like Tony and Bruce, and Jimmy Taylor is an awesome guy as well. I got to meet him this year. In that part of having the recharge and the unplugging, there's no way I could not ask this question as a fun one. What does Justin do to unplug?
I have become a bit of a runner, I guess you could say. And I've done some marathons and half marathons, things like that. And that's another thing. People say, well, you must love running. And I'm like, that is false. I do not. I like after running, like the feeling afterwards. Right.
Yeah.
And so when I'm not working, I want to be outside. I want to be doing something active. I want to be with the family. And then also, going back to my agriculture roots, I guess. I love growing vegetables. We've got chickens. And so I've even managed to work a few chicken related stories into HR presentations.
I
So,
love it.
because honestly, it's not that different. You're trying, the goal is for them to be productive, and then they're contributing the wonderful gift of eggs to breakfast or whatever you're eating. And so you've got to
Hmm.
know how to feed them and take care of them so that they produce more, right? So there's a lot of natural overlap in raising chickens and being in HR, believe it or not.
I love it. My own boss was a guest on this podcast, which I found very heartwarming that he came on, and his way of unplugging is gardening. And your family was from West Texas, so the soil here is not known to
Oh,
help
great.
vegetation
Mhm.
whatsoever. So he was able to put his story into how gardening helps his leadership style, because you can't plant someone in this type of environment and see them bloom. You've got to plant them in, and it's your right as in leadership to go, okay, I see something in you and I want you to hear me out. I want you to try out HR. Just
Mhm.
give me that. If it doesn't pan out in like 90 days, you can go back to being an accountant. But I really think this is good. And I was like, I would have never thought gardening helps you become a better leader, but I loved how he put it together. And I can see how chicken raising and running. In this, I loved your quote that you provided. Is that the best piece of advice you've ever received, or is there another piece of advice that you've received that has influenced your career or your personal life?
A couple of things I would probably add on top of that. I mean, I tell my team all the time, is like, you could take your job seriously without taking yourself so seriously. I think that
Yeah.
humility that comes with knowing we don't know it all, or having failing forward, making mistakes, being in a place where it's safe to do so, and just not getting so serious that you lose sight of the big picture. Because I feel like the smaller your job gets, if you make it about that one thing you really don't like, that one person or that one boss or that one piece of your job that you hate, the easier it is to disconnect and walk away from, because you're just walking away from one thing. But if
Yeah.
you can remind yourself of the bigger picture of what your contribution is, what you're responsible for, how you're serving other people, in addition to making income, supporting your family, all that good stuff. I think when your job gets so small, it's really easy to give up on it, to walk away from it. But if you can just take a step back, just zoom out until you can see a bigger picture of how this plays into maybe your next job or your next opportunity, or it's getting you somewhere, I think you can find a lot more gratitude in those moments and be a lot more appreciative of the season, rather than not just always rushing to get out of it and move on to something else.
That's very good, Justin. Well, our time is up, and I'll leave with this. You can hear us on Spotify, Apple, and iHeartRadio, and now on Google, but you can also see this on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. Justin, what would you leave the listeners with today if they're going through a season where there's a season of uncertainty, or maybe they're not in alignment? What would you do or say to encourage them on their next step?
Look back at the seasons of your life that maybe you have been in a better place emotionally, physically, psychologically. Understand enough about yourself and do an inventory on what helped you recharge. What was it about that, so that you can potentially recapture that moment? Because it's easy to get lost in just what's urgent, what's right in front of you, what you're currently responsible for, and that can just feel so heavy. But to look back and be able to remember a time where it wasn't that way, where it did feel differently, where there was a different experience, so that you can hopefully work towards recreating that moment. Because sometimes I don't think people realize when they did feel energized and charged. They just realize when it's not there, right?
Yeah,
And
love it. I love our time together, Justin.
yeah, thanks for having me, Given. I appreciate you.